It's a new week.
All right, there we are. We are finally live. So let's do the normal sign on. Well, it looks like we're live again with another volume of the Future of Education Roundtable discussion series. Today, the one guest who actually made it is Samantha Alva. Samantha, I want to welcome you to the conversation. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of what some people might call positive psychology. You may recognize it as social emotional learning, or any of a number of other descriptors. But basically what it is, what we need to focus on today is what are the skills that are going to make today's kids successful. And with that, I'm going to share our conversation out a couple of places. So Samantha, I want to ask you, as I'm doing this, what are the skills that we need to be instilling in children, the understandings, the wisdom, whatever it is, that are going to make them successful no matter what the world of tomorrow looks like? Take it away. I'll share us out.
So the number one skill that we actually have to focus on is positive relationships. If kids don't understand the positive relationship of, hey, as I learn this, it's going to help me be able to participate with my peers, participate with my future, then there's no reason in their brains that they're ever going to do this. So that would be the number one skill.
Debbie, what do you think?
I agree. I think connection has proven over the years to be the key skill, that the ability to connect. It's a human need. We have an opportunity to really allow our students to have time to learn that skill. And I think we're missing the opportunity for not purposely teaching it with a meaningful end to a goal, right? Where we want to ensure that they know exactly how to connect with others, how to form personal relationships that are positive, that serve them moving forward, and that they understand the why. I think that's super important.
Talk to me more about understanding the why.
Well, I know for me, and I know for my students at my school, when they get why we're doing something, they're much more engaged. They're much more willing to step into it. And I think when students know that the power of connection allows them to feel better about themselves, allows them to enrich the life of others. We do our compliment circle at the end of each day, which builds our culture, which is all based on building those positive experiences, those positive relationships. And they can feel that. And I think when you can feel it, it's real. And so we need to make sure that they feel it. They're not just going through the motions.
So why can't we just arm them with a solid understanding of the 3 R's, perhaps some sort of a vocational training prior to getting out in the world, and let them kind of take the path we took? Jackie, what do you think?
I think it doesn't work because
based on what?
Based on it doesn't work because it's not enough. Students need to understand how to interact with the rest of the world. It's become even more important over the years as the world has become more global. Globalized, trade is more globalized. Work in itself, it's not unusual to be working internationally, whereas when I was 16, certainly, if you worked across the UK, you were considered balling. Now, now it's like, it's just normal. Yeah. If you can't build a relationship, if you don't understand the importance of it, the importance of positive relationships, right, then ultimately there will be a problem. And I'd like to take it a step further, just to stay in context. An example of this is the events of the last week in the United States. Clearly, there was a breakdown there.
Yes.
With what constitutes a positive relationship. And it went on to become a global issue very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Because at the end, it caused people to have to think about the way they do things.
Yeah.
We need to put that into students at a younger age, because the perpetrators on this occasion were not young,
Right.
but they clearly learned it along the way.
Let's talk exactly, or specifically rather, about what is it that we need to instill into children at a younger age, as specifically as you can. What is it that we need? And maybe we'll talk more about the rioting and looting situation in a moment. But if we agree that it isn't working, and I think that when someone with the ability to think discerningly or critically looks at social media, and I want to caveat this by saying social media is a warped lens. You know, in the same way that anytime you take a poll, not a poll so much, but like now over here we have a thing for college students called ratemyprofessor.com.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything like that over in the UK, Jackie?
Rate my teacher.
Okay, so my statistics professor in college made a really compelling argument that and interestingly enough, he got a low rating, but he said you can't trust those, and the class didn't understand why. And he said because what the rating and the reviews don't tell you is that the middle of the bell curve of people won't rate their professor because they've had just a satisfied experience. They're not delighted, they're not upset, and without being sort of motivated by an extreme emotion, people won't take that kind of action. So when we see social media and it looks like all the loonies on the right and all the loonies on the left are you know, the lunatic is on the grass, right, from Pink Floyd. It looks like they're flooding the lawn. That's not actually what's real. It's who's the loudest. So social media is a warped lens, but given that, we can still, with a little bit, I think, of judiciousness, we can still see that there is a shortage of critical thinking. There is a shortage of the ability to act discerningly and then show up. So given that perspective, that context, what is it that we need to be instilling in children specifically? Samantha.
Yes. So when we teach kids, if you're teaching kids math, let's just say math, because it's pretty logical, pretty straightforward. 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
But they don't understand why they're learning it. They may at first do it just because it's novel. Then they might do it because somebody wants them to. But if at some point it doesn't click that they can use this, you know, the why, like she was saying, if it doesn't click for them, they're not going to pursue it. If they don't see a reason why to do it, it's like anything in life. You know, if you don't have a big enough why, you're not going to do it. Babies want to walk, right? So they will do everything and anything they can to walk. And they will be very resilient about it because they really, really want it. But if they don't have that resilience, and you guys were talking about that a little bit last week, and having the resilience to continue on. So having the relationship, being resilient enough to keep on and to keep that importance going, those are extremely important aspects, I mean, of the whole education system. You can have Common Core all you want, but if you aren't embedding into the curriculum, you know, putting in there the why, you know, in some of the curriculum that I've seen, they're actually using the stories as an opportunity to teach social messages, to teach positive social messages, how to cope, how to get through hard things. And those are the kids that are like, wow, you know, it's engaging them at a deeper level than just some logic that we're not necessarily going to get. You know, if you give someone a logic question and there's no reason for them to answer it, they're not going to have a lot of motivation to do it. But if you create this social situation that you need to solve the logic puzzle, that's why escape rooms are so popular. Things like that, because it gives this social message of let's do this together and get through it. You know what I mean? We're going to save somebody. That's why it's so popular. So if you don't have that message in there of why we need to do this, why this is going to further you, you know, our brains just shut down.
So I guess while I agree with you, I feel like we didn't quite get to the answer of the question, what is it we need to be instilling? I don't know if it's enough to say we need to instill why. I think that's a little, it's a little, you know, high level, and we need to get our boots on the ground a little bit.
Okay, I can go there. So we have to define what the problem is, first of all. So I worked in special education. I worked in special education for this last school year. And one of the biggest things that I taught my kids was, okay, well, what's the problem? What is it you're really looking at that's bothering you? And I have a little girl that was learning to read, and she's like, well, I don't know what it means. It's like, well, can you look at it and can we figure it out? Well, yeah. So the problem was she didn't know what it was right off the top.
Yeah.
Okay. Her belief was she needed to know what it was off the top, or she wasn't doing it right.
Okay.
So as soon as we said, well, what's it mean to have that belief? You know, so adversity, this comes out of Martin Seligman's work. So adversity, we have to know what our adversity is. We have to understand what the belief is about that adversity. We have to look at the consequences and what's going on. And in her case, it made it to where she was giving up too quickly before she was trying.
Yeah. And
then we go into the 3Ds. We dispute it, we distract, we distance. And then my dad says, and then you argue too. So my dad's take on it. And then once you either have disputed, distracted, or distanced, depending on what the appropriate step is, then you can come back in and you can actually re-energize it and start the process again and see that problem's gone. You know, and every child I've worked with, this has been very, very effective. You know, there's different patterns of the same concept, you know, that you can find out there. But it all starts with understanding what is the problem. And the problem is not usually the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true across most of human experience. Debbie, let's talk a little bit about math specifically, because my hunch is that most parents can relate to that negotiation about, you know, like, trust me, math is important. And the kids basically say, prove it, right? That we basically just go, sell me on it, for God's sakes. How is this going to matter to me? Two questions for you. How do you cultivate an interest in math specifically? And how do we get them to understand that how important it is?
All right. So for us, we use a math program that allows our students to move at their own pace. So that's very, very important. You've got kids who are super smart in math and are held back, and then they lose interest and get into trouble. And you have kids who just don't get it as quickly and they struggle to keep up. So that's the first thing we've eliminated. Next, we allow them to work on their math, but then we pull them on a weekly basis into a collaborative exercise where we either do mystery work, or one of the last projects the students did was to build a playground to scale, right? So they built their playground, but they had to measure, they had to, you know, so we allow whatever they're learning in math, we bring it into real time. We also bring in a lot of guest speakers that will speak to. So when we built this huge mammoth treehouse in the backyard at school. It's like huge. And we brought in the gentleman who engineered and constructed it to talk to the kids about what he did. Well, it's all math. And he told the kids he is a high school dropout, but he knows his math. And he's made a living because he's able to use his math. And we brought in engineers. We brought, you know, so we do everything we can to make it very real for them. The other thing is, once they show mastery, we allow them to move on. So if you can demonstrate to me that you know how to do long division, I'm going to congratulate you and hand you a calculator, because none of us do long division anymore. We use a calculator, right? But if you can't master it and show me you know how to do it, you're not going to understand the next step in mathematics. And so I think it's honoring them as individuals and saying, I get it. This long division is not very fun. And once you get through it, and I'm going to help you, and you can show me mastery, we're going to let it go. and you'll never
Yeah.
have to do this again. But there's
Right.
and letting them understand there's a reason for why we're doing it. And I think we're very transparent with that. And my teachers know that if you can't answer why to a student, why you're teaching a lesson, you should not be teaching it. And that really helps with the buy-in.
So what is the why then?
The why
What do
is
we
nothing
tell them?
important. We
Why
need
do-
it.
We need it. That seems to be sufficient.
Because we show it. It's not just my words, right? There's irrefutable
Right.
evidence when
Yeah.
the contractor comes in and speaks to the kids, when the engineer
Yeah.
comes in, when the guy who has a band and gigs at night needs to understand what his costs are to know
Yeah.
what to charge, right? So
Yeah.
we bring it to
Yeah.
them at all
Yeah.
different ways. And we don't say, this is the math lesson for today. They make that leap on their own. And if they don't, we might help them with some questioning, but we don't present it as, here's why you need math. They're like, oh, this is why. So when you come to it yourself, it stays with you. It sticks a little bit better.
Yeah.
So,
And for those of you out there who are thinking of a career as a professional musician, here is a safety tip for you. Don't divvy up the money at the end of the night. You will never count it right. You will always make mistakes. It took me years to learn that. And the band would get so mad at me because they want their money in their hot little hands right after they're done performing. And I'm like, you're not getting nothing until next rehearsal because I need to sleep. Otherwise, one of you is going to get $500. The other one's going to get 26. It's just, it doesn't pan out. But I digress. It's funny specifically with math because I think by the time you find yourself in the position of having to convince a very small person about the relevancy of math, you've been so, I mean, it's so thoroughly obvious to us how important it is, right? That it's one of those things like trying to describe water to a fish or something. It's like, and so I like the idea of bringing in people who do cool things through math. I think that's a really strong one. And you know, you may or may not be able to deduce that I've been in that conversation a few times about like, just trust me, math is important, you know. And it's not enough to say, you see everything around you? That's all math. That's just they don't get it. So proof, other frames of reference like the teacher or the band leader and the engineer and the construction guy. I think these are good. Let's move on a little bit past math though. And what I want to get to is if let's put it this way. If we could not teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, we couldn't teach it anymore. For some reason, it was outlawed. We live in a George Orwell dystopian nightmare now, and we can't teach those things. What skills do we teach children in order to assure their success? Jackie.
To be able to communicate by listening and hearing what people are saying. And I say listening and hearing because it's one thing to sit there and catch little snippets of the conversation.
Right.
Okay. And say, I heard you. But when you ask for meaning, then there becomes a problem.
Looks like just 1 second. Looks like we have a late addition. Hi, Wendy. Welcome to the show. Can you hear us? Can you see us? I think Wendy's frozen, guys.
I think she is.
And are the rest of us still good?
Hi, I had the time zone.
You got
So I had
Tanya
the time.
Hardinged by
Yes.
time zones. Well, Wendy, the problems don't stop there. Your connection is not strong. So we're going to go ahead, and since we're already in the midst of it, we're going to press ahead without you. If you want to jump out and try to jump back in, please do. But I cannot hear you at this point. So
Yeah.
we were talking about listening and hearing.
Yeah.
Tell me the difference.
An example is as parents, we often say, listen to me.
Yes.
Okay. And that child sits there and listens
Yes.
and then does the complete opposite of what you've said
Yes.
because they didn't quite hear, they didn't understand
Yeah.
what to do. Okay. the importance of teaching that skill of hearing and understanding is probably the best way of replacing at least 2 of the 3 R's, because then you could give instruction and somebody would hear enough to be able to follow that instruction.
Mm-hmm. How do we do that?
How do we do that? It has to start young, because having taught in high school for as long as I have, good luck with year 8 onwards. Grade 7, they're new to high school, they're coming in, they're fresh, they're keen. It lasts a semester, possibly, until they're like, yeah, I'm here now, I'm in high school and I'm cool, you know, and then it goes. If we could start it, you know, as a specific thing earlier in the primary process, you know, through elementary, through middle school. And Debbie is the perfect person to talk on this, because her elementary students are the prime example of what we all need as teachers in high school. You know, they know how to hear what you're doing, and they show it through the project-based learning that they carry out, and they hear each other. I couldn't tell you the number of times where I produced what I think was an excellent group exercise and thought, this is going to be a fabulous lesson in high school. And before you know it, no one's listening. The exercise time is up and it's taught in the normal way with no specific training, and no one's got an answer, and the bell goes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big fan of UK primaries. I'm not a big fan of UK secondaries, because I think that specific skill gets lost in translation between the two.
Interesting. So I'm on a personal level a big believer in the 2 sides of communication. You know, being able to articulate your thoughts, of course, but also being able to listen, and sort of for bonus points, being able to listen at a level that that approaches what the person's intending to say and what they're feeling versus what the words are. One of the fascinating things, fascinating in a sort of a frustrating way, is most of us aren't able most of the time to have the words we choose reflect accurately the thing we're trying to communicate, right? So I think that is important. I'm kind of looking for a couple of answers here, and interestingly, among the 3 of you who are all very qualified, I'm not getting them yet.
Well, you're not listening and you're not hearing.
You need to ask better questions.
Wow.
I would like to.
Woo! I feel like let me just say, I just invited that. Okay. Debbie, you're up.
As a parent of a hearing impaired child, who we determined at a very young age struggled to hear.
Yeah.
So this is what would happen on the preschool playground. As you know, kids will be playing in the sandbox, and then they're like ants. They all decide to go somewhere else. There's not maybe a lot of discussion, right? Yeah. Well, she thought that she was being excluded from those conversations, that they were leaving her. And so at the ripe old age of 4, I had to teach her how to ask clarifying questions, because she would hear things that were just not what was said. And so she got really good at clarifying. And I think we know as communicators, it is the responsibility of the person communicating to ensure the receptor has heard what they've said and understands it in the intention it was meant to be sent. And so that is a skill that we teach our students. And I know you want to say something, Manny, so I'll stop.
I just want to talk about how much of a complete paradigm shift that was for me when I learned that. Think about it too. Now we go through life understanding this idea, and it's an interesting challenge to be able to see how few people understand that. Yeah. Right. I can't tell you how many times I've found myself getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop when I was trying to share with somebody, look, When you're communicating, it's absolutely your job to make sure that the other person understands you. Nobody wants that kind of accountability, which brings me to one of the things that I was hoping we'd start talking about with what we need to be teaching kids, which is accountability. And accountability, I think, accountability's twin, critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Samantha.
Which we're talking about developmentally tasking kids to do something they're not necessarily ready to do when they're young. And then by the time that we get them into the older grades, I mean, I love what Debbie's talking about, doing it at the kids' level. I think that's absolutely amazing. But most kids, think everybody looks like them, talks like them, and is just like them in their brain. Mm-hmm. When realistically, we all see differently, hear differently, and process differently. So we're basically a bunch of.
Let me just do one clarification here. When you say that kids think everybody else looks like them and talks like them, we're not talking in terms of things that are so hot button right now, like skin color. We're talking about more, like kids just assume that everybody else sort of is having their experience, right?
Yes.
That's
exactly.
Okay.
You have eyes, you have ears, you have a mouth, you have hands. You live just like I do. I had a beautiful child who looked at me and said, I don't know why my teacher can't go faster. I already get it. And I said, well, you can't just think about you. Yeah. And he totally was like, what? It's not just about you. So developmentally, kids have the idea of it's all about them. And if you have a parent that has encouraged that idea in a child, then that kid's like, yeah, it's all about me and you need to do it my way and da da da. Sure. And we already have this natural instinct to make it about us and our social interaction. Yeah. So if we encourage that the wrong direction, tell me, teachers, if you encourage that the wrong direction, you get that kid that is like, oh my gosh, how do I reach that one? Because they're like, this is all about what I want to do, not about what you're telling me to do, Yeah. And so this idea of communication is that we're all aliens and nobody experiences the world the way I do, but nobody's teaching that.
Interesting. Is this, assuming that we buy that premise 100%, okay. And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm not putting my opinion in the ring one way or the other, but assuming that we accept that premise 100%, particularly the part you said in the beginning about how we're talking about teaching them skills that maybe they're sort of not developmentally ready for. My question then becomes, can we teach them through project-based learning and experiential learning and sort of get around the idea that they're not developmentally ready for the concepts yet?
It's not about getting around it. It's about playing to it.
Tell us more about that.
So if you have a child, everybody's watched a child learn how to go from laying down to rolling over to sit. I mean, we've seen it in movies, TV, whatever. We know there's a sequence. And
sure.
The eventuality is they're going to learn to walk. Very, very, very basic. This is instinctual. Okay. The idea of education being something that we are building a foundation or taking the foundation that's already there of our social interaction and then building upon it these skills. And as they get the skills, they go to the next level, does not end at the end of school. So why should we go from birth to 5 and then at 5 say, oh, by the way, I don't care if you've got the skills you need. Let's just put you at this milestone anyways and make you keep up with peers that they're not necessarily ready to keep up with. And, oh, by the way, we're not going to teach you developmentally, how to think beyond yourself. I mean, these are things that need to be taught and modeled. We need metacognition. We need actual modeling of it. All of these things, because these kids need exactly what you're talking about, the experience of it. Because there are a lot of kids that don't get the experience of it, and it's not enough to read about it. It's something you have to actually dive in and do. So project-based learning gives you the ability to help kids do that. But there's good project-based learning and bad project-based learning. There's the project-based learning of I'm going to meet you where you are and give you what you need, which is what it sounds like Debbie's doing. And then there's the project-based learning that is just keeping that same old model of, I don't care if you have the basis or not, I'm just going to tell you to do this, and I just want a product. Do you see the difference?
Of course, yeah. I even though I know that it is technically project-based learning, the second example is sort of, I don't even think of that when I say project. You know what I mean? And that, so I digress. The original question was, how do we start to instill critical thinking, and can we get it in there through something besides, can we get it in there earlier than their developmental level suggests that they're ready to receive it? And can we do this through, projects and experiential stuff? And you're saying we can, right, Samantha? That's
You can help development along. I mean, it may take more work. You see it in special education all the time. You have a child that developmentally has some sort of something that happened, whether it be a trauma or a life event or a medical event or whatever the reason. For some reason, they're just at this level and they're struggling to get to that next level that they need to be with their peers. Okay. And if you keep working with that child, all of a sudden there will be this aha. I have a child who's 14. He was adopted out of the system. He was stuck at second grade math. He could not get second grade math for anything. It took many, many, many years to help him with the developmental thought process of, okay, this is ones, tens, hundreds. But after working with him long enough and helping him understand and break it down and find all kinds of different experiences to know what that was, counting jelly beans. Buy a bag of jelly beans and count to how many basketball hoops. I mean, he did hoops every day, counted to 100 till he got that hundreds place. Then he said he was going to do 1,000. Never did, but it's that experience of having it. So there, you can, to a point, you can say, okay, let's scaffold this down to see where your developmental level is and teach you that part of it. So that then when they're ready, it's, oh, boop, they've got it really fast. But my question to you, Manny, is why would you want to take a child past their developmental level? What's the purpose of it? I mean, if they're learning so much already in the level that they're at, why would we push them into something they're not ready for?
So I'm not suggesting that we want to take a child past their developmental level. What I'm saying is, do we agree that, so the hypothetical question was, what do we teach them if we can't teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore? Right? What do we teach them to prepare them for the world that they're going to be moving into? And critical thinking and analysis, what are some of the other ones we covered? Well, they're eluding me at the moment, but the point was never to take a child past their developmental level. The point was, can we start them being, I guess, I'm going to say a sort of a taboo word here, but indoctrinated into these ideas that we know from experience contribute, or at least have a causal effect toward life success. That's my question. So I'm not looking to do like a supercharged space monkey program or something like that, but what I am looking to do is leave profoundly fewer kids growing into adults who never are able to get out of second gear at best in their whole fucking life. Perhaps except for the time when there's an emergency or something. That's what I am looking to do.
Can I say something here now, Manny?
Yes.
What I would say to you, Samantha, is, and I'm not Manny Soldier in any way, it's just, who sets the development levels? How do we know they're not ready? Because one of my biggest frustrations in the system is the setting of milestones. Developmentally, that person's, people who say developmentally, they're there. And
Right.
in class, as a teacher, you're looking at this student's face and they're saying, help me, I can do more, why won't you let me? The public school system, the national curriculums tend to be set in a way in which you can only go up to a certain point without people questioning whether you're ready, without.
Oh, absolutely. I think there are a lot of times that kids are ready for more or different. You know what I mean?
Different, yeah. Or something a little bit extra, that will, for example, I'll give you an example. In my son's class, he's 8. They had a Zoom birthday party today. And he said, one of the boys, they were each changing their names to something different. And one of the boys changed his name to hello in a number of different languages. And he's 8. He's known as the smart guy, but why should he be considered not developmentally ready because he's in grade 4? They're lucky they have a teacher that has said to me, if they get to that point, give them the grade 5 work. Allow them to. They'll still be in grade 4, but if they could do more, let them do more. Don't limit them. That gives them, I think, when that happens, they build more skills, like the critical thinking that you came up with, Manny. What does that? The ability and the confidence in asking questions, right? So when that child says, why can't I do more?
Yeah.
The system is one that, why are you questioning me? I'm your teacher. I did all these qualifications. And the real argument is, I wasn't ready for that question, so I'm just going to be wrong and strong right now. But
I like that.
So it is a case of making them confident enough to ask. And making it a thing in the educational system that you're in to answer questions as appropriately as they can be answered, so that the students then feel that confidence to ask more questions. Okay, that builds up their critical thinking. They never just accept, they challenge. And it's a common thing in my 6th form classrooms, which are grade 12, grade 13. I always say, challenge me, make me earn my money. If you don't agree with something that I've said, by all means, take me on. You won't win. Well, take me on anyway.
I think that Samantha's question about, why would we want to move them past their developmental level, and then Jackie, your observation that of who sets those levels, both open up the whole thing we're trying to get at here, right? Which is, the thing that we're all dancing around but not saying is that the educational system is extremely rigid as it currently stands. It is, in terms of the idea of who sets those standards for developmental levels, we can look at No Child Left Behind and realize that we have collectively shat the bed on our kids.
That was not set up by psychologists that understand psychology and developmental levels and things like that. Okay.
But Samantha, that's my point exactly. There is no but wait a minute here. The problem is we don't have people qualified who are actually making decisions about our children.
Absolutely.
That's my point exactly. We've got people litigating, and we've got people lawmakers deciding this stuff. Historically not awesome, to quote Iron Man. So,
and that's one of the biggest problems with curriculums is that you have people out there that are writing it to sell it. They're not writing it to do the best. You know what I mean? And you have these other people over here that are regulating it and they may or may not have ever been in a classroom. They may or may not have ever studied child development or education or any of that. And it's very frustrating as a teacher, to walk into a situation where you're like, well, do they even know this stuff?
I believe it was last week we were touching on the untenable dynamic for public school teachers. So, I mean, absolutely. Let's let Debbie chime in a little bit with how do we start instilling these kids with what they need, Debbie? Continue on with this idea that for some reason we are no longer allowed to teach them reading, writing, and math. As a thought exercise, what do we teach them and how do we do it?
So I read an article yesterday that was pretty interesting. So it was talking about Einstein being on the beach, and he's walking in the sand, and he's noticing he's sinking in the sand. Then he walks closer to the water and he doesn't sink. And then he walks into the water and he starts to sink again. Most people just keep walking. He doesn't. He stops and tries to figure out why. And I think I just want to piggyback on what Jackie was saying. We need to celebrate our students asking why. We need to encourage that. We need to make it an environment where we teach that as an okay thing to do. Because when you ask why, when you start to understand your world, you take and you put a stake in it and you have some ownership, and that ownership leads to an ownership of your learning. And they then stay with their inquiry. Because when I worked at the after school program that I ran, I was getting children as young as 3rd grade that had stopped being curious. Yeah. That's a very, very sad thing. Learning is for the rest of our lives. We need to continue to question and ask and move forward and gain clarity. And I think giving our students an opportunity where the classroom isn't, I'm the teacher, you're the student. It's we are all here to learn together. Right. And we have a very much a culture of we support each other. There is no stupid questions. We're going to work together. We're going to, so we teach brainstorming in 1st grade, right? We teach collaboration. We teach these skill sets that allow them the opportunity to really think through things and ask those why questions. And I think it's creating the culture that they will do. I worked at the jail, and my buddy and I, my partner, we decided we would get all the inmates to brush their teeth up and down instead of side to side. We accomplished that in a very short period of time, like crazy period of time, like 3 days. And I think, when you look at our job as parents, our job as educators, it is to be the guide on the side. We know, at least we believe we know, what the next best step is, and to allow our students to understand the why we're doing this, and then to guide them there, and then to hold a space for them and belief in their capability until they step in and own that themselves. And I think that's a really big way. So when we look at child development, of course, they all develop differently. And I think that's great. That's awesome. So that knowing what the next step is, regardless of the time it takes to get there, is the key piece. And being able to hold that spot and encourage them to make that leap forward is what I think a good educator does, regardless if they're teaching reading, writing, or arithmetic.
Here's my imagination at this moment. There is or are hopefully not a parent, but multiple parents watching this, multiple educators, multiple people who this is relevant to. And I imagine that there are a number of them going, oh, it sounds so good, but you guys just aren't being realistic. You don't, right? You know what I mean? Like, you don't get how hard it is, on and on and on, blah, blah, blah. Is it possible? Now, let's agree, because the proof is overwhelming and incontrovertible, that within the public school system, such a thing as we're outlining here cannot be created. Sometimes the bureaucracy gets too big. Sometimes it gets too institutionalized, right? This happens. There's a wonderful monologue in an old 80s movie called The Crow with Brandon Lee. You know it, Samantha? Do you remember the villain from that movie? He's like the coolest bad guy of any movie until Thanos came along.
Yeah.
And he has this great monologue where he talks about how, you have an idea, the idea becomes an institution, and then the idea loses all of its original meaning. And it's really, really good. Anyway, I feel like the conversation is always around changing the school system, the one that's here now, the dinosaur, right? With meat still left on its rib cage, but dead.
And it's changing anyways, Manny, like it or not, it's changing anyways because of this whole COVID-19 thing.
Well, yeah, it's changing, but that's different than let's change the system. That's the system clumsily answering and responding to even to a sharp left turn.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just state outright, I don't think it'll ever happen within public education. I think public education is over the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
So how then, what do we do? How can we even create a system that is more intuitive, that is more dynamic, that is more fluid in its ability to meet kids where they are? And what does that look like?
There's only one problem I see.
Which is?
Parents vote with where they send their kids.
Right.
We, as the people, have control, but we keep giving it over to everybody else. And that includes education. As long as parents continue voting that public education is okay by sending their children to a public institution,
right,
change is not going to happen. Now, there are those who want change that will make other options available, or that will choose other options, like schools like Debbie's, that are working with kids at their level when they're ready and helping to push them that way.
Right.
There are amazing teachers out there, and they are stuck in the system, and they're doing the best they can, and parents seek them out, and kids, lucky kids get those, but until we take some more initiative and control and say, hey, this is what we want, by voting with our dollars, by putting our kids other places, that's when real change happens, when we demand it, not just, whatever. Through
this whole process, and Samantha, you won't know this, but Debbie and Jackie will. I keep going back to Elon Musk and Tesla, right? As the sort of the example. Sorry, guys, we're going to change to our names one more time. There we go. Before he came along, General Motors tried an electric automobile program. It was largely created out of pressure and not out of a capitalistic desire to tap and create a new market. And so there's a whole documentary on it called Who Killed the Electric Car. If you love a good conspiracy, it'll just burn you right down to your little bellies. It's just so frustrating, but I digress. This isn't a political rant by any way, shape, or form. And then along came a guy who said, you know what? And here's his overarching sort of worldview. Even if a problem has a low potential rate of solvability, if it's worth attempting, you should attempt it anyway. This is like I would say that, as to the extent that I know about him, this is Elon Musk's guiding life vision. And so he is attempting now to solve traffic through tunneling. He is attempting to make us an interplanetary species while simultaneously attempting to transition us out of fossil fuel. But that's not enough. He's also building an interface between us and AI so that we don't become irrelevant and redundant when AI hits. He's doing all of these things. Now, I say creating a new educational model is two things. It's worth doing even if it has a low success probability. I also say it's bigger than I can probably achieve in my lifetime. But that does not mean we should not do it. Because and we can borrow from Elon Musk once again, right? Here's something for everyone watching. Samantha, here's something for you. It's a golden carrot to tantalize and dangle. What if we had an educational system that was squarely focused on the future and the questions we're asking here today? We do not value studying to the test. We do not value Common Core. We do not value no child left behind type thinking, where we pull everybody back to the level of the least productive child in the classroom. Instead, we value critical thinking, communication, community, problem solving. Debbie, what else am I forgetting here?
Connection,
collaboration. What if we had a school that had relationships and collaborative partnerships with business, entrepreneurship, the public sector, small business, everything you could think of? What if instead of getting our money from the government, we were funded by apprenticeship programs with different industries? So Google is giving us X amount of money every year so that we can cultivate coders and tech people that come out of high school further down the road than a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. These things are doable. We just have to think differently. We just have to approach the problem with a different lens, a different set of values, and a different outcome. So I want to leave everybody with that as the sort of, let's salivate over that and let's get off our asses. Let's stop sitting back. And Samantha, I don't mean you, because you're obviously doing it, but you guys out there watching, the only way we really change society is to change the people that are going into it. I mean, I hate to be a harbinger of doom, but it's too late for most of us.
No, it's not. We have neuroplasticity just like they do. It just takes us a little longer.
I suggest that the worthy area of focus is cultivating a new system that will produce more energized, enlightened, in the classical sense, not in the New Age sense, citizenry. I suggest that the problems don't go away until the citizenry itself changes for the better. And the way you're going to do that I can see, is through giving educational options that are truly educational and not indoctrinational. I sound like Al Sharpton. So with that, I want to thank you, Samantha, so much for joining us. I really, really appreciated your insights and your views on this. And of course, Jackie and Debbie, thank you both so much. Let's sign off for another volume of the Future of Education Roundtable.